There's night shining bright, colors dance in the night. You don't owe them a thing, it's not up for debate.
Is that right?
Oh, yay! I think I fixed it. I think I fixed it. Oh, yay! I think I fixed it. Okay, awesome. All right, so I think I found, I guess it's not really that exciting. I thought it was very exciting. Because I think a lot of us have read these text messages and they're just, there's something wrong with them, and I'm not sure what it is. So, because I know here in the PCA, Brett Payne said that DM and BF, they both made statements that everybody was home by 2 a.m. Asleep or in their rooms. But as we can see, DM is awake. At 2:10. And then, like, I feel like she went out, and then she's coming home right around 3:51, and she creates a new contact in her phone. So then when you come back here, 3:51 is right around 4, which is when she actually said she woke up. I think that's weird that she wakes up and like puts a a number in her phone. So I'm thinking that she was actually awake right around 4 o'clock. And then we have allegedly at 4:12, Xana on her phone on TikTok. So I think that this time is very close together. And what I wanted to talk about is the timeline. Because I know we saw the autopsies. If I could pull that up. Because on the autopsy report, I think it was 12 p.m. that they were listed for the time of death. And so I was reading a little bit about it. And so sometimes the time of death, and I know that there's this ambiguity with Idaho and how they train these medical professionals to be the coroner, and how they really just have to be elected. And it was always a question of who determined the time of death. And so I know that there was a little bit we thought, well, maybe the police did it. And I know police are not, I guess they can, but they're not really supposed to. They're supposed to be either the coroner or the pathologist. Now, if we go over here with my butt, that's a really funny name. Whoops. I was reading her biography again today. So it says in here, I have the right page up. It says here, the coroner may authorize an autopsy to be performed by a licensed physician to aid in accurately and scientifically determining the cause and manner of death. The coroner shall also prepare the written report of the factual information gathered during the course of such an investigation. And I know that we watched that interview where she was saying that they contract out to Spokane for the autopsies. And so, yes, maybe Kathy Mabbott did determine the time of death, because she also determined the cause and manner of death as well. However, it's a little bit different than what you would call a postmortem interval, a PMI. Now, since Kathy would have authorized the physician for the autopsies, and the autopsies were done in Spokane, so somebody else did an examination of the bodies. And so that, I guess, is the pathologist or the medical examiner would perform this type of examination. This type of examination is not a perfect science. However, there are certain chemical reactions that happen, during the stages of death, where pathologists can kind of gauge a range. And so my thinking was, if this medical examiner, the pathologist, not Kathy Mabbott, was able to determine this PMI, this post-mortem interval, because I think it's kind of well known that text messages are not always accurate. And this entire case is centered around these text messages from Dylan, and I guess Bethany too. So without these here to establish the timeline and then the probable cause, the only other thing that like since the beginning, I wanted to know about the medical part of this, because the medical part of this could completely change all of these text messages. And then it would be in question, why was this timeline fabricated here with these texts? However, I don't know for sure if the post-mortem interval could show that, because yes, it could be a range of a couple of hours. And so then we're talking about, can you tell the difference between 8 hours and 12 hours? When was the actual cause of death? Because I know originally, or the time of death, originally we thought the time of the crimes were between 2 and 3, or like right before 3 o'clock, with the Banfield. Because didn't Kaylee and, oh, this is pure speculation, by the way. Kaylee and Maddie got home around 2:56, right here. And is that, here's 2:53. So did MM call BF on the way home? Oh no, they got home at 1:56. Never mind, I keep getting that confused. Either way, so because if this post-mortem interval is any different, or there could be where the medical examiner could be on the stand saying something like, yes, it is possible that this timeline that has been established, that it's possible it could have happened that way. However, I would place it more on this hour. And so all the information that we have is right here. And as we know, this has been questioned, and these text messages, they're not always that reliable. So what I want to do is read about this post-mortem interval. What that means is the time that has elapsed since the person's death. And estimating it is crucial in forensic investigations to help determine the circumstances of death and aid in criminal investigations. Now, the importance of the PMI is an estimation that helps reconstruct the timeline of events surrounding a death, which is vital in criminal investigations. And so, let's see. However, environmental factors can influence it, with the temperature, humidity, the different stages of the rigor mortis, the post-mortem changes. And I was mostly, let's see here. So this is the really cool thing here, because this article right here is called "The Various Methods for the Estimation of the Postmortem Interval of the Silipede." Uh-oh. Okay. A review. Now, this is when they use incest to determine time that has lapsed since the body was found. So this is called the methodological etymology that deals with the use of insects. Why does it keep doing that? or other arthropods associated with the corpse at a murder scene in a legal investigation to provide data not available by using the normal methods of classic pathology. Determination of the postmortem interval is crucial and fundamental step in any death scene investigation when the death has not been witnessed. Estimation of the postmortem interval is defined as the length of time between death and the corpse discovery. At the onset of death, the medical parameters to establish cause, matter, and time since death began to degrade. With the progression of time and soft tissue decomposition, a postmortem determination by a pathologist or medical examiner, and it becomes more difficult and less accurate. So forensic etymology is now an integral part of the death investigation when estimating the time since death and beyond the 72 hours. Now, I do think that they will be able to tell in less than that too. Now, the forensic etymology is considered the most accurate method for establishing the time that is elapsed. Now, I also found this interesting Reddit here where it says here, is there an official form for the time of death and why the coroner estimates that time of death in a homicide case? Or is it something that is just added to a death certificate? Also, do they ever amend the time of death? And there is a process. And is there a process for that? It says, sorry, I am not in forensics and do not know how this process works. I tried Googling it, but I can't find the answer. Any help would be appreciated. Now, and so in the autopsies that we saw, the time of death all on there was 12 p.m. And we know that that's not true. However, this person down here replied, and they said, it does depend on jurisdiction. So yeah, it would depend, but typically the time of death is the time the coroner arrives on scene. The post-mortem interval, or the time elapsed since death, can be approximated, but I don't think it's possible to get an exact time of death unless it was on video or recorded in a hospital. Now, I was thinking, okay, so they're going to put a general time of death on the autopsy is when the medical examiner arrived. But we all know that the medical examiner did not arrive at 12. What was it, 4:30 or 5 in the evening? And I guess they had just put 12 on there because that's when the police had arrived. However, there's also a medical examination where somebody is actually looking at the tissues and looking at the body, which I guess Kathy Mabutt would too, but not as in depth as what they would do in Spokane for the autopsy. And I am so curious to see what that actually led to, because if that is any different than this timeline right here, the state is in trouble. No, I mean, they're already in trouble, but for me, the medical side of this is just what I'm fascinated about. And I'm also very interested to hear about the medical examiner to talk about the injuries and how much time that would take. And I don't know if we're ever going to get there, because this timeline, I feel like, is just going to fall apart before then, but I am very curious. And I found this article that says Idaho, the dubious distinction of being singled out as the best place in the nation for a criminal to get away with murder, in the literal sense. I feel like they write articles about this. And so it says here, a timeline of failed efforts to reform Idaho's coroner system. Idaho lawmakers have come close to instituting reform to the state's coroner system. Every attempt has failed. Often the reason is simple. Experts told ProPublica in recent months, nobody wants to spend money on death. All right. So here it says, I think this is very short, a string of suspicious deaths, 2 calls of infanticide that were nearly labeled as sudden infant death syndrome, a curiously low rate of opioid overdose deaths. And yeah, I think that's still true. I don't know if Moscow records all of their overdoses. Well, who knows? There's no report taken. And then there's like pain and Maui. I don't remember. I didn't say a report. So these are among the red flags Idahoans have pointed to over the decades as they tried to get those in power to change Idaho's system for death investigation, which relies on elected county coroners with virtually no support or oversight. Lawmakers have come close to a few times to instituting reforms, but every attempt has failed. Often the reason is simple. Current and former coroners and national experts told ProPublica in recent months nobody wants to spend money on death. But that leaves Idaho with a system where the one coroner can choose not to follow national standards while a neighboring county coroner does. I want to point that out because if there aren't any policies and procedures in place for this coroner, which it almost sounded like there wasn't, because we should watch the interview. I have it up. But she's like, I had to wait for law enforcement to finish doing whatever they were doing. That's usually not how it works. That is not national standards at all. So I'm very curious about how that will play in, where I guess if it gets that far, I don't know if this case is going to fall apart tomorrow or what, but the text messages, they will be talked about tomorrow because there's a motion to eliminate for them. Well, I don't know if they'll be talked about tomorrow or maybe the next day, but whatever happens with those text messages, the whole timeline can just unravel. And I don't know what's going to go on tomorrow because the clubs, apparently are off. But for me, when there's no standards or policy procedure in place, I feel like that's when mistakes can happen. And it did kind of sound like police kind of run the show. That like whoever the coroner is, they're just like elected. I don't know for sure. This is complete speculation. And so there's something weird there. I think we've always known that there's something weird with the coroner and not being able to go in with law enforcement, and that there really wasn't, I don't think there were ambulance called, and there is just a lot of ambu around there, and we never saw the bodies being removed. So there's something really weird here. And since Idaho doesn't have national standards, is that something they can hide behind, or is that something that can be called out? Need some Z's. Hello. Need some Z's says, in my opinion, I believe things happened much earlier than the state claims. I would agree with that. Need some Z says, I agree, something weird with the coroner. Yeah. And so this is my whole thing. It's been my whole thing, this entire case. What is that medical examiner going to say? Because that medical examiner, she could say 2 sentences and the timeline is out the window. Like, go home, Brian. Because she could just be like, the postmortem interval, I have it after I examine the bodies. I want to say that it's in this range between this hour and that hour. However, I don't know, pure speculation. There might not be any way for her to determine it's any different from what Dylan says it is, or pain. However, I don't know. I do feel like everything happened earlier, and I think that these text messages, there's a very good chance these are staged. And so if these are staged, And we don't even have all of them. This is just, what the defense has released to us. So if these are staged, the whole timeline in the car, everything is done. So these text messages are very important. I mean, everything is going to be very important tomorrow, but I'm so curious what's going to happen. Like, if this is staged and it is somehow established in court that this is not accurate, like, the stages are like, okay, fine, and like never investigate these roommates. Needs and Seed says she's not even a medical examiner, though, just a coroner. From my understanding, I'm not sure if that matters in Idaho, though. See, there's the ambiguity. Ambiguity. I can't say the word right now because there isn't any national standard. All right, let's go back to that article. There it is. So calls for reform to the Idaho system have popped up nearly every decade since at least the 1950s. Some of the earliest pleas for change came from local physicians and state health officials, alarmed by Idaho's refusal to modernize its approach to death investigations. Now, that is a strong statement right there. When you've got like local physicians, like hospitals being like, you're kind of making our job a little difficult here because you're not following what we're all following. And, that approach to a death investigation is not really the most accurate. So I'll move on here. Look, they clipped it to the paper. It's like the best place to get away with murders, right? Idaho. I feel like we know that, right? It says here, the Idaho Statesman highlighted a national magazine article that called Idaho the best place in the nation for a criminal to get away with murder in the literal sense, because the state exemplified how an antiquated county coroner system can contribute to frequent miscarriages of justice. A medical examiner system, a recent American magazine article reprinted in Reader's Digest, has given Idaho the dubious distinction of being singled out as the best place in the nation for a criminal to get away with murder in the literal sense. And then it goes down here to March 1959. A doctor who served as a coroner of Idaho's largest county resigned, citing antiquated and totally inadequate state law. He said legislators that year declined to introduce a bill that was a middle-of-the-road endeavor between the abysmal inadequacy of the existing law and central state medical examiner system. September 1965, Dr. T.O. Carver, state health administrator at the time, told the Associated Press, "I think if someone wanted to commit a homicide without having it discovered, Idaho would be a good place to do it." Carver praised Oregon's medical examiner system and said changing Idaho to a similar setup would cost more, but it would yield evidence and truth. There's another cutout of a paper. It says attorneys, law enforcement authorities, and public health officials often have voiced criticism over the system, and there have been some attempts to change it. Good place for homicide, I think. Well, yeah, it's the same quote again. If someone wanted to commit a homicide without having it discovered, Idaho would be a good place to do it. So Dr. Carver said the Bureau of Vital Statistics receives many death reports, which lists natural causes or a heart attack as being responsible. Yet in many cases, there has been no autopsy, and the person signing the death certificate has no real knowledge of the cause. The body is buried, and then that's the end of it. In October 1965, the director of Idaho's Vital Records Bureau raised an alarm about the qualifications of coroners, the state's autopsy rate, and questionable death investigations. The director said coroners handled 600 to 700 deaths in Idaho each year, and 10% or less had autopsies. Fall 1976, a hospital pathologist in rural Idaho called for replacing the state's archaic coroner system with a medical examiner's office. Well, that scared me. I don't know what that was. Idaho was one state where it would be very easy to commit murder and go undetected, he said. According to news archives, with a little intelligence and care, no one would ever know it happened under the present coroner system in our county. There are many things I see that need correction, instigation, and development, he said. He called for replacement of the county coroners with a medical examiner system. Idaho is one state where it would be very easy to commit murder and go undetected, he said. With a little intelligence and care, no one would ever know it happened under the present coroner system in our counties. March 1997, following a string of suspicious deaths, the Idaho statesman again urged reform. In the editorial, Idaho must recognize that the elected coroner system can take it only so far. The writer said, Idaho residents need protection. They need coroners, pathologists, and medical examiners who can work with law enforcement to catch criminals. There's another cutout. Include training examiner in Idaho's coroner system. Idaho must recognize that the elected coroner system can take it only so far. A coroner's training and expertise can be called into question in a court of law. Oh, I think if it gets that far, about will be questioned well, heavily. Procedures and investigations are open for argument, even budget. As we've seen in the Canyon County deaths, are subject to query. Idaho residents need protection. They need coroners, pathologists, and medical examiners who can work with law enforcement to catch criminals. They need the same officials to possess the expertise necessary to stand up in court. So, December 1998, the Post-Register in Eastern Idaho produced a series on child deaths that found a death of autopsies, including 2 cases of infanticide that were almost attributed to the sudden infant death syndrome. In the 5 years that followed, legislators mulled coroner reform bills but didn't pass any. A county prosecutor told the paper, it's not working in late 20th century. It's not going to work in the 21st century. Okay, so January 2006, 10 years after her son's death was ruled a suicide without an autopsy, a Boise woman who became an advocate wrote in the Idaho Statesman, legislators must take a fresh look at laws governing the coroner system in Idaho. Here's February 19. What is that? 6 years ago here. A former state senator, family physician, and county coroner wrote in his blog that Idaho was quite likely underreporting opiate overdose deaths, partly because coroners weren't detecting and reporting them. Ever since I was the Latah County, coroner for 15 years, I have wondered about the wisdom of the county coroner system for the state of Idaho. Dan Schmidt wrote, to all of the county coroners, ask yourselves, are you happy with this system you have for investigation deaths? Are you doing a good job? Are there ways this could be done better? And I thought it was kind of cool. This was written by Audrey Dutton. David Bird, welcome. Need some Z's asked, was it only Ethan that got an autopsy? There's speculation that maybe he got two, but I don't know for sure. David Bird says, as I understand it, that we're all autopsied, but the Chapins arranged for a second for Ethan. Need some Z says, especially if LE University and prosecutors want to hide the truth about this too. We, the jury, actually will we see wounds, autopsy photos, crime scene photos? I have my doubts. I do too, because I know at one point, when they were talking about a X-ray, and like the X-ray was like, was it 2023? I don't know if it was 24 or not, but that's a little late to get X-rays from autopsy, and maybe because the whole thing around the autopsies and the removing of the bodies was so weird. Maybe it's because of this antiquated system they have for coroners. Maybe there really isn't one because they don't really follow national standards. So maybe that's why a lot of that information is absent because their system is absent. And February 2019, I think that's not that long ago. And this coroner was there for 15 years. I wonder if did he retire that year in 2019? Oh, I don't know. I have my butt page up somewhere. Oh, where does that keep going? Here we go. It says here under Title 19, Chapter 43 of the Idaho Code, the coroner, as soon as she is informed that a person in her county has died as a result of violence, whether apparently homicidal, suicidal, or accidental, or A, under suspicious or unknown circumstances, or B, when not attended by a physician during his or her last illness. The cause of death cannot be certified by a physician. Shall go to place of death and take charge of the body, which I don't think she did in this situation. An investigation into the events leading up to the person's death shall commence in cooperation with the appropriate law enforcement agency. The coroner may authorize an autopsy to be performed by a licensed physician to aid accurately and scientifically determining the cause of death and manner of death. The coroner shall also prepare a written report of the factual information gathered during the course of investigation. The coroner may use many different methods when determining the cause of death and manner of death. This includes medical records for physicians, hospitals, from physicians, hospitals, and other healthcare facilities. Federal code concerning protected health information specifically indicates that protected health information can be disseminated to coroners for the purpose of aiding in an investigation into the cause and manner of death and to assist in the identification of a deceased. Although these records are placed in a case file, they are not subject to public view. Now, I seem to remember in the interview that I don't think Kathy, well, she didn't do the tox reports. I don't know if she did the autopsies. I don't know, because they went to Spokane. Okay, so the coroner may authorize an autopsy without consent of next of kin. The forensic autopsy includes a detailed external examination, surgical examination, x-rays, and collection of tissue and body fluids. Tissues are prepared and examined microscopically by a forensic pathologist. Bodily fluids are submitted to one or more laboratories locally and throughout the United States for analysis for the detection and quantization of alcohol, prescription or illicit drugs or poisons. Cultures may also be prepared for determining viral or bacterial diseases. The results are reviewed by the forensic pathologist to aid in determining cause of death. So even in reading that, the forensic pathologist is heavily involved in this process. So I don't know if anybody knows what Kathy Wood's role actually is, because they don't really have any procedures. Heather Fitzgerald, welcome. Mint cardigan really makes my butt's red hair pop. Yeah. Steve W, welcome. Master of none, right? So the forensic pathologist is heavily involved there. And the next one is death certificates are prepared by the funeral home. Once investigation is complete, the coroner will record and certify the death certificate to reflect the cause of death. This information will then be transmitted to the state of Idaho Department of Vital Statistics. The coroner does not issue death certificates to the general public. The certificates are only available from the state of Idaho Department of Vital Statistics. So in this action here, she's doing an administrative function. She's filling out, documents. I don't know if those are digitized. It's probably not paper anymore. But yeah, so she's doing an administrative function there. The pathologist apparently does not fill out those forms. They probably have other forms that they fill out, but it's not that. So again, we have the pathologist is heavily involved in this, so much so that it seems that she's doing administrative work. So coroner's inquest. Under Idaho code, the coroner, if she has reasonable grounds at her discretion, may conduct an inquest into the manner of death of a person. The coroner will summon 6 persons qualified by law to serve as jurors to appear before her to hold said inquest. Jurors shall hear sworn testimony of factual information by witnesses called by the coroner, review photographs, reports, and documents to determine the manner of death. The decision of the coroner's inquest is final and not subject to appeal. Okay, well, oops, I don't think that happened in this case. Here's personal property. Latah County Coroner's Office, in conjunction with law enforcement, may collect personal property that is determined to be evidentiary value for safekeeping. Real property such as residential dwellings, buildings, or automobiles are sealed or secured until the legal next of kin is identified. In most cases, property determined not to be of value to the investigation will be turned over to the legal next of kin. Prescription medications and contraband will be disposed, destroyed, or turned over by law enforcement officials. So we saw the police taking all those things out of the King Roadhouse. And to this day, I don't know if anybody is sure that wasn't considered evidence. I mean, there were we all saw the van shoes. So I guess they're hiding under the guise of we're just returning things that aren't relevant to the investigation. Taco, welcome. Oh, Pit Pot. I love Pit Pot. What is he doing? Heather Fitzgerald says, Have you ever read Thompson's on the Idaho State website? Does it say that he's actually what is that website where prosecutorial misconduct and there's a list? To know. Welcome. Heather says they moved that stuff the next day and the Cowboys went in. Isn't that interesting? Like there was something else that happened too that was kind of weird. There was something that happened like yeah, that all happened because one of them was the 7th and the other one was the 8th of December. Too fast for Flea's best name. Welcome. Couldn't see you. All right. So we have copies of reports. Reports generated by Latah County Coroner's Office are subject to public view only after the conclusion of the investigation. These reports are available upon written request and appropriate fees are forwarded. The reports do not include protected health information and reports or documents from other agencies. Identification and viewing. Contrary to popular belief, visual identification by family or friends is not usually necessary. Many methods are used to identify remains at the coroner by the coroner's office. In most cases, photographic identification is all that's required. Occasionally, other methods such as fingerprints, tattoos, jewelry, x-rays are utilized for positive identification. We understand that the family may want to view their loved one as soon as possible, but it is recommended that this be done at the funeral home facility. We will work with the funeral homes to ensure that this can be accomplished as quickly as possible. Organ and tissue donation. The Latah County Coroner's Office supports the efforts by various organ and tissue donation organizations. We will make every effort to accommodate these wishes of families to donate. The coroner will evaluate the circumstances surrounding the death and determine if donation can proceed. The coroner may consult with the prosecuting attorney of Latah County if needed. The last one here is law enforcement. Law enforcement responds to all emergency calls and are often the first to arrive on scene. Their experience, training, and resources that are available to them enable the coroner to carry out as complete of an investigation as possible. Welcome, Kane. Hello, Amanda Smith. Oh, Kane, I missed you. Here you go. All right. What was it? Okay. Let's see if we can watch this just to get a refresher. Hopefully you guys can. All right, it's on mute because there's a commercial. I can't handle commercials, so I'll wait until the commercials are over. Well, I can't hear it. Can you? Oh, no. I don't know. Did you guys hear that? No sound. Yeah, I don't think I have the sound. I wonder why that is. All right, so that's not going to work. Okay, so here's an article. It's called Omics. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the postmortem interval estimation, a systematic review. Now, since Lake Talk County contracts out to Spokane, I would imagine that once the body is in the possession of Spokane, that it would follow Spokane's protocol. And I'm not sure after they release the bodies back into Lake Talk County or into Moscow or wherever they went, maybe they go and follow the archaic system that Lake Talk County has at that point. And so, let's see here. It says post-mortem interval. The PMI estimation is let me see if I can blow this up. A challenge of utmost importance in forensic daily practice. Traditional methods face limitations in accuracy and reliability, particularly for advanced decomposition stages. Recent advances in omics sciences, providing a holistic view of postmortem biochemical changes, offer promising avenues for overcoming these challenges. The systematic review aims at investigating the role of mass spectrometry-based omics approaches in PMI estimation to elucidate molecular mechanisms underlying predictable time-dependent biochemical alterations occurring after death. So these biochemical things that are happening in the body, they should be able to hopefully be able to see those and like use that in part of their estimation. Oh, podcast with Peterson. Welcome, Annie. Very good to see you. So these biochemical, they're time-dependent biomedical alterations occurring after death. A systematic search was performed adhering to PRISMA guidelines. Whatever these PRISMA guidelines, Idaho doesn't have them. Not that I know of. Through the free text protocols and databases, PubMed, Scopus, and Web of Science. The inclusion criteria were as follows: experimental studies analyzing as investigated samples, animal or human corpses in toto or in parts, and estimating PMI through MS-based untargeted omics approaches. Oh, they have critical appraisal checklists. Okay. What else do you have here? Predictable time-dependent degradation patterns of macromolecules in different biological substrates have been discussed with special attention to molecular insights and postmortem biomedical changes. The introduction, the estimation of postmortem interval, PMI, defined as the time elapsed since death, represents a complex and pivotal challenge for forensic pathologists in daily practice. The role of PMI becomes crucial in context of criminal investigations. Indeed, it may direct suspicions towards a certain perpetrator, defining the whereabouts and last movements of the victim, and corroborating or rebutting witness testimony in court. Throughout the decades, many different approaches have been developed and proposed by forensic pathologists for PMI estimation. In forensic daily casework, the most widely used methods rely on assessment of early postmortem changes. These are represented by agar, liver, and rigor mortis, and the gross visual evaluation of the formative, destructive, and special phenomena, physiologically affecting corpses during early and advanced postmortem phases, respectively. Such approaches are often complemented and assisted by forensic etymology analyses, which provide useful information for PMI inference through the examination of types and life cycles of insects commonly colonizing cadavers. Other analytical methods, although less widely applied, comprehension of studies of reactions of potassium concentrations and histology investigations of different tissue substrates. Nonetheless, the aforementioned conventional methods are highly subjective, limited to specific postmortem phases, and strongly influenced by a wide range of variables, such as intrinsic environmental factors, temperature, humidity, ventilation, and the action of the macrofauna on the body, and intrinsic factors such as age, sex, cause of death, underlying pathologies, body mass index. These variables impact postmortem changes and corpses decomposition processes, potentially leading to unreliable PMI estimations. Moreover, the most of the above traditional methods, accuracy and precision decrease as decomposition advances, demonstrating poor feasibility in cases longer than PMIs. So I guess trigger warning. I think I'm going to get into some more medical things here. So we know, well, it's been alleged that there was an 8-hour gap. And from that 8-hour gap, the coroner did not arrive to 4:30 or 5 o'clock. So is that 12 or 13 hours? So by the time the coroner arrived, I guess they would expect to see what happens post-mortem and the rigor mortis and all those stages around the 12-hour mark. Now, of course, none of us were there, so we don't know what the condition was to determine now this is all my speculation here, because I don't know, this timeline here of all these text messages between the roommates, that could have been fabricated. And if, like I said, if that's fabricated, the whole timeline just goes. And if this PMI is able to be determined, which is, I don't know if they can get within hours, like a range, and if they can determine that it could have the PMI could have been before this, that could be an issue. Let's see here. What do we have? Steve W. Oh, Danity Kane, hello and welcome. So good to see you. That's what I wanted to see. So, to overcome these drawbacks, recent scientific research has focused on developing new biochemical and molecular approaches for PMI estimation, mainly based on the examination of the postmortem biochemical degradation patterns. These include hypoxia-induced changes and the altered enzymatic reaction, cellular autolysis, and secession of the anabolic pathways, as well as the microbial breakdown processes. So I'm going to take a guess here, and I'm going to say this medical stuff, if different from the text messages, is a lot stronger evidence to establish not only a timeline, but the amount of time needed to inflict whatever injuries are on these victims. Trigger warning. And so medically, certain injuries will take longer than others. And I am very interested to find out how much time, a medical examiner thinks that it would take to do that, because that also would change the timeline if the medical examiner says something like, in order to have these types of injuries, you would need more than 9 minutes or whatever pain says it is. Maybe it's the sparkles. Heather, where are the sparkles? Oh, the color of Brian's dream house is sparkly. All the pink is giving me Barbie Christmas ad-lib flashbacks. That was awesome. I'm so happy you went to the Barbie website, Heather. Danny Keene says, I find it interesting that in the Valo, I heard an expert say that even after Charles was shot twice, once that went through the heart, he still would have been alive for minutes. Oh, yeah. Anne called it a dollhouse. She certainly did. OMEX technology aim at reconstructing the biology of the investigated system, i.e. the cell, tissue, or organism, through the detection of genes, genomics, mRNA, transcriptomics, proteins, and proteomics, and metabolic in specific biologic sample in holistic and non-targeted and non-biased manner. These approaches have recently gained increasing importance and also in forensic practice, as they provide comprehensive analysis of postmortem alterations at molecular level in different substrates through high throughput detection techniques. Therefore, they offer great potential for more accurate and objective time since death estimation. Proteomic approaches prove to be more reliable than DNA and RNA degradation-based analysis, as protein markers are more resistant, less than susceptible to extrinsic factors, and exhibit slower and more reproducible degradation patterns than nucleic. Oh my gosh, so that made me think. So for the blood on the handrail, they should be able, the tech should be able to look at different proteins and markers to be able to determine approximately how long that blood could have been there, as well as many other things. And so I guess the same thing can happen when previously, I guess they would use the degradation of DNA to determine the amount of time since the time of death to when the body was discovered. And so now they're saying they have something that is more reliable than even determining that from the DNA or RNA. Very interesting here. Moreover, due to their postmortem stability, proteins are more suitable for long-term PMI estimations compared to metabolic and lipids, which are better markers for shorter PMIs. Okay, cool. So I don't, like, it's 12 hours at least, at the very least, it's 12 hours since the Dillon timeline and when the coroner arrived on scene. So I don't know in the grand scheme of things whether that's considered, I guess that's short term. So I feel like long term would be like 72 hours and above, but I don't know for certain. So if they do have several different ways to determine this PMI. And so the stomach content of every one of them is extremely important. And I know speculation here, we're kind of confused. Did Xana eat pizza? Did the girls finish their macaroni and cheese? You know, all of that could either support or not support Dylan's timeline with her text messages. Now, I'm not accusing Dylan of anything. I'm saying that she might have more information. But whatever happened with her, I feel like she, from all of her actions, it seems like she almost took responsibility. Like she has this where she needs to do something, you know. So I have no idea what she knows or what she doesn't know, but the reality of it is, and I'm not bashing anyone, text messages versus biology versus medical. And, you know, maybe the medical stuff will support the timeline in the text messages. I don't know, but I'm saying that the medical side of it is going to hold a lot more weight than those text messages. Okay, so moving on. Therefore, the application of the integrated multi-omics approach, combining that has been recommended, allowing a wider range of PMIs to be investigated. Mass spectrometry, MS, is one of the leading analytical tools used for omics approaches, enabling simultaneous identification and quantification of a large number of endogenous and exogenous low molecular weight biomolecules according to mass to charge ratio of ions. This is achieved through a multi-stage analytical process based on ionization of molecular compounds separated by ionized molecules through MS coupling devices, capillary electrophoresis, liquid chromophotography, and subsequent mass spectromic detection analysis. So they're saying that is promising. There was a picture that I wanted to bring up. That didn't work. Oh, this looks fun. What about this? Okay, I finalized this one. Okay, so I do not work with direct patients. I am not in clinical, so I just am around this kind of stuff all the time, but I am not expert. And you know that I like research, so trying to find a good picture for us. Ooh. Hmm. That wasn't that great. Oh, this is the one this is really good. This picture here is really great. This is the one that I was looking for. Okay, let me blow it up. Yay! Ah, Chic Babe, welcome. So good to see you. Danity Kane says, I bet Ann Taylor is going to try and bring in her own experts to establish time of death. Thank you. She says, I'm right on the money. Thank you, Danity Kane. Yeah, this is important stuff when it comes to the medical part of it. And it could completely just blow over Dylan. I mean, and law enforcement, because law enforcement, is responsible for placing the timeline within her text messages. Let's see if I can blow this up a little. So at the very least, it should have been 12 hours because there was an allegedly 8-hour gap, and then the coroner didn't get there until 4:35. Yes, the bacteria. Yes, the insects that come after death, the way that they eat and they reproduce and everything. You can also get a timeline from that as well. You can get a range because this isn't an exact science. They're still working on it, on how to determine the PMI, postmortem interval. Okay, Danity Kane says, I heard it speculated in the beginning that that's why the girls had the doors open to keep the bodies cold so they would deteriorate slower. Okay, to mask the actual time of death, is that what you mean? Mm-hmm. Okay. So at 12 hours, we've got the algor mortis, which is the cooling of the body. The body cools by 0.78 Celsius each hour after the first. And then it says body reaches room temp. The body cools at 0.39 Celsius every hour until, okay. Yes, they should have been at least in this stage. If they were in any other stage, and I'm sure there are clinical. I know that there are some of my subscribers who are. Well, where did the chat go? Who do direct care, who do know this stuff better than I do. So out there you can put us all straight. But I am just. And I know that we haven't really been allowed to talk about it because, anytime anybody brings up anything that is actually founded in science, we kind of get shamed and we can't talk about the roommates and everything. But it's like, there's a really important day tomorrow. I don't know if some of this stuff is going to come up, but that timeline is going to be heavily questioned. and all of these text messages as well. Because this right here, these text messages that are just, and also what else do we have here? There was another one. Like I just don't understand who, if the medical part of this does not support these text messages, I don't know what these professionals in Idaho or Moscow were thinking. And I have a feeling that maybe they just don't care. So they just don't care if the medical part of this doesn't match these text messages. It's just, and I'm so curious about this, but like, people get so angry, like, oh, you're not allowed to talk about that. Well, let's talk about it now. Better late than ever. Let's get some common sense back in here and try to see how the science holds up to this alleged story that we've all been given. Yeah. Podcast with Peterson, Annie says part of the problem is they don't think it all. Yeah. I don't know. They just don't. They don't care how ridiculous this story actually is. Diana Kane says outside temperature, humidity, and various things can play a role. If they were out on the pavement outside, would be different than inside in a bed. Yeah. Heather Fitzgerald says, I mean, I'm just saying, if the medical stuff is as good as the car and the cell records and the brows, he's toast. Okay, you bring up a good point. So the medical part of this, that could also throw out the car. All that quote unquote there's stills of these ridiculous cars that the state is like, look, they're all the same car. We're like, no, they all look different in everything you showed us. Yeah, so it's like, well, if the medical part says this range of time is more suited to, the examinations, then that could discard the car. And I was just thinking that law enforcement has a lot writing on text messages, which, as we know that it's not strong evidence. So there isn't, in my opinion, strong evidence for this timeline. For one, text messages are, they're just, sometimes there's no substance to them. And then, these cars, these ridiculous cars that are supposed to be the same car. I can't tell by looking at that car if it had anything to do with what happened in that house. I don't know. I'm looking at a car, like, did that? I don't know. So, like, if you don't have a strong foundation for the timeline, which is the text, then the car is useless. Bunny Murphy, welcome. Oh, Lewis. There's Lewis. Yeah. So yeah, they have a lot writing on this because if any of like traditional things used to support a state's theory of a case are usually used and relied upon, you know, to strengthen their case. Their case is centered around text messages. And these text messages, they do not match what is said in the probable cause affidavit. Because right here at 419, BF calls DM. What are they doing? So I assume DM is in her room, and Rosanna at 412 is on TikTok somewhere. So what is that, like 7 or 8 minutes between those? And so, okay, so someone's here. When did they say that? Is that in between 4 and 412? Does that have anything to do with DM creating a new contact in her phone? JB says, Audrey, what are your thoughts on the defense expert that specializes in guns? Remember in the beginning, Christy said her niece heard they got shot. I do remember that. I do remember there was an interview. By the way, everybody, this is all speculation this time, you know, mixed with a little science. I do remember that interview where that was like the first thing I think they heard was somebody was shot or Kaylee was shot. Now, T Pastor Please Best Dave says, I wonder if anyone will make a vid of the PCA and just cross out all the statements that we know are a lie now and see what percentage of the PCA is just an outright lie. Yeah, like what would be left? Welcome, G Wiz. So if, I don't know, it's like everybody, oh, Mommy Ball, welcome. It's like, you know, I think it's pretty safe to say that the probable cause affidavit, it's not true. It's just not true. So we don't really know what happened that night. We have no idea. And so it's like, well, why would we keep saying, okay, well, Xana was here at 412 and this happened over here? Throw it all out. The scientific method. If something is wrong, you have some bad information, you have to throw it out and start again. So I don't know if we can trust any of it. So any of this, none of this information, you know, is substantial. And it doesn't look like the state has anything to support this story. You know what? The defense is probably going to go in there tomorrow and they're going to have concrete evidence about what happened that night. The defense might actually know more and show us more because, you know, the state has had, what, almost 3 years now? 2 years? I don't remember. To show us what happened that night. And they've got blurry pictures of a car that they say is one car. It's clearly multiple cars. But you can't tell what cars those are. Only have text messages that could easily have been staged. You know, but they do have this media campaign. That is their biggest, strongest thing that they have going. You know, and then of course we have Cy Ray, who he challenged even the judge, like, you know, and that just blows. That probably blows all the cell phone information out. So if he's going to do that, oh, what did it? And is Pot say the pattern of life? So Cy Ray works within the pattern of life. I'm curious about what the actual pattern of life here is for this timeline. of these text messages here from the Dylan and Bethany. I mean, clearly they knew something was happening. If they didn't know something was happening, they wouldn't be contacting them all. So they knew something. And I know people, they'll immediately like jump on you when you're like, hey, they knew something. But, that's part of that media campaign again. That's all they have. Oh, yeah, we have another kind of chart a chart here of the changes after death. So more than 1 hour, the rigor of the jaw. More than 2 hours, patchy modeling. Less than 3 hours, rigor not seen. So, and of course, these are all on a sliding scale depending on what happened, and not everybody is going to go through the same thing at the same exact time. So, just kind of use it as a guide, I guess. Okay, so less than 4 hours, the response to the chemical stimuli present, hypostasis confluent rigor fully established, more than 4 hours. Oh my gosh, something just went. Okay. The electrical, the muscles, the excitability, the muscles, less than 5 hours. Hypostasis fixed, more than 7. Rigor processing, less than 9. And the body completely cooled and rigor disappearing, more than 16 hours. What's kind of interesting about that statement is that if the body has already gone kind of through the changes that it goes through, and then rigor starts disappearing, does that mean the bodies would relax again after they go through the cycle? Where's that pic? Here. Because I think at some point during the cycle, doesn't the body just kind of lay flat again? Supine, whatever they call it. So, which would be interesting, because if that is true, that after, it goes through all of those stages and the body kind of relaxes again, then yeah, it actually would make sense that everybody found them just laying in beds. That would mean that I think either, more than 12 hours had gone by when they found them, because it sounds like they found them, that they may not have been in rigor mortis. So, in rigor mortis, I think, trigger warning, that techs have arrived at the scene, and the bodies will have limbs in the air, or however your body stiffs up, it's not going to just lay flat. And so if the police, the coroner, from what we've heard about the other students finding them, it sounds like they were all just they're sleeping. And so does that mean that, it was over the 12 hours where, the body would lay flat, or was it like very recent, like before rigor could set in? And so these are all really important things to know, because that can also determine a sort of a timeline of whether these text messages are accurate. That's interesting that everybody kept describing them as sleeping. I would think that's either before rigor mortis set in or after. And that would that could throw the timeline off, maybe. Or it just falls right in line. I don't know. I'm speculating here. Okay, JB says, interesting. Kaylee may have been sitting up or slumped over. Yeah. Oh, Yvonne Poole, welcome. Yvonne Poole says, even if a phone is out of service, out of the service area, it still gets satellite GPS. Yeah. Okay. Right. And like, I don't know. What does T Passport Please say? He says, my butt probably took out her mood ring from 1983 and sticks it on her fingers and says, yeah, dead, then goes to the next one. Where does she get mood rings? Okay. Okay, let's see if we can find another picture. One of two. Whoa, graphic. Turn away if you don't like the graphics. Yeah, trigger warning. Okay, so can we see it? What about Outcast? So down here we have like kind of a timeline. There's like minutes, hours, days, and weeks. So say around 10. Yeah, something about body temp. They would be able to well, I don't know. Because the medical examiner wasn't involved until much later. So I don't know what the medical examiner would have seen, especially when Latah County or Idaho in general, they don't have any policies in place. And so do they actually document like what they were seeing when they arrived? Oh no, we're over here at 12 hours. Yeah, rigor mortis disappears. And there's the liver mortis. There's insects again. They'll lay eggs. That also can give them, I guess that's around the 24-hour mark. Okay, we don't have to look at that anymore. But I think you get my point. There are a lot of things that are going into this that I don't know if any of us ever looked at. And tomorrow we're really going to find it. I just thought this postmortem interval was really important just to put out there, just to think about purely medical, from a medical standpoint, because the postmortem interval, it is the standard medical and scientific technique to support such an estimation as the elapsed time from the time of death to when the body was discovered. So we're talking about medical and scientific standards here, which is, it's a little a little better than like pure speculation, but we are basing it on this empirical data that can actually give us some more reliable information than the PCA. Um, Okay. There was, oh, I don't need that. I have this other article. Well, I don't remember why about this one. Time since death from rigor mortis forensic perspective. Time since death is an extremely important topic of study for forensic medicine. Time of death is a question almost invariably asked by investigating authorities to link the criminals with the crimes. Determining the crime since death has always been a topic of keen interest among the forensic pathologists from the inception till date. Many workers in forensic medicine have tried to investigate to determine the time of death on the basis of postmortem findings, those biomedical changes we were reading about earlier. From the ancient era, the triad, the algor mortis, the rigor mortis, and the livor mortis, has been the basis for ascertaining the time since death collectively. Till date, it is still the important and most fascinating criteria to ascertain the time since death. The assessment covers the importance of the time since death from the rigor mortis in forensic science. So, among this triad, the algor mortis is the cooling of the body after death. The body temperature at the time of death is generally 37 degrees Celsius. If anybody was fed up with that as a Fahrenheit in chat, that would be great. Which falls to the temperature of surrounding by 12 to 18 hours after death. The livor mortis or post-mortem staining generally appears over dependent parts of the body within a half an hour to an hour of death and get fixed within the 6 to 8 hours after death. Similarly, the rigor mortis, which is the cadaveric rigidity, starts developing within 1 to 2 hours after death and takes around 12 hours after death to complete development and remains in developed stage for 12 hours and disappears in the next 12 hours generally. This can give the approximate time since death till 36 hours after death. Many other sophisticated techniques like biochemical studies of the CFS, vitreous humor, the aqueous humor have been tried to reach the accuracy regarding time since death. The other methods, such as study of composition changes and study of etymology, are the practice to estimate time lapse after death. Since among these three criterions, as described above, rigor mortis gives the longest estimation interval regarding the time since death. Hence, we had chosen this topic to review purpose. Rigor mortis is the state of postmortem stiffening. It has some shortening of muscles of the body, both voluntary and involuntary. Following the period of the primary plasticity, it is due to chemical changes affecting the proteins of the muscles fibers that is acting as the myosin. This is a sign of the end of the cellular life of the muscles. Okay, so, oh, look at this. We get some history here. So, history of rigor mortis findings. The first investigation of rigor mortis is attributed to NIST in 1811. Wow. And, that's cool. All the way back to 1811. He is the first to demonstrate rigor mortis. Bendel and Smith in 1946 postulated the role of ATP in the onset of the rigor mortis by their experimental studies on PSO as major muscles of rats. The study has given the biomedical basis for the development of the rigor mortis. In 1950, Shapiro demonstrated the sequential progression of development of rigor from the head downward. Further, in 1960, Bendel studied the biophysics of muscular contractions, which led to a better understanding of rigor mortis. He stated that voluntary muscles consist of bundles of long fibers of the dimension of a human hair. Each fiber is formed of densely packed myofibrillus extending through its whole length. The myofibrillus are the contractile elements, and they are made up of protein filaments, myosin filaments, and actin filaments. Due to this concept, study of rigor got a microscopic approach. H.A. Hubbard, 1877, Kropcher, and the Bergeroy in 1988, Keith Thompson, 1969, Gordon, 1988, and many others have been the pioneer in understanding the various factors affecting rigor and its relation with cause of death. Huxley, 1974, the separation of actin and myosin filaments, the consequent extendability and softness of the muscle, and the energy needed for the contraction are all in one way or another dependent on the adenosine, the triphosphate, the ATP. This is in high concentration in resting muscles, and it's level through constant. It's always a balance. After death, the failure of the resynthesis of the ATP led to a fall in its concentration within the muscles, and accounts for the hardness and the rigidity of muscles and rigor. The development of rigor mortis is a process of change in the intensity of muscular rigidity over time. Initially, the muscular intensity of rigor mortis is weak. Subsequently, it increases and reaches the maximum, then decreases and practically disappears after a certain period of time. Rigor mortis first appeared in the involuntary muscles and then involuntary muscles. Rigor mortis starts appearing within 1 to 2 hours after death and takes around 10 to 12 hours for full development and remains steady for the next 12 hours and then disappears in the next 12 hours. Rigor is said to have developed sequentially, but this is by no means constant, symmetrical, or regular. Typically, it starts first in the small muscles of the eyelids and approximately 1 to 2 hours of death, and then progresses to the muscles of the lower jaw, neck, muscles of trunk, upper extremities, and lower extremities. Lastly, the muscles of the fingers and toes are affected. The disappearance of rigor mortis is the same as its order of appearance. The nature of its gradual development, order of progress, and ultimate disappearance give the rigor some striking characteristics. Developed rigor mortis, once damaged by any means, will never reoccur again in the body. The disappearance of rigor mortis, denoted by plasticity of muscles, is caused by action of the alkaline liquids produced by putrefaction. Since the last 2 centuries, rigor mortis is one of the most important factors in determining time since death. Various authors studied this phenomenon to review of which is taken as follows. The NIST in 1811 has published the first scientific description of the rigor mortis. Wow. According to him, no measurable shortening of muscles occur during rigor mortis unless the muscles are subjected to tension. When rigor is fully developed, joints of the body become fixed, and the state of flexion or extension of these joints depends upon the position of the trunk and limbs at the time of death. If the body is supine, then the large joints of the limbs become slightly flexed during development of rigor. The joints of the fingers and toes are often markedly flexed due to shortening of the muscle of the forearm and the legs. Cadaveric rigidity affects successfully the vestibular muscles, those of the face and neck, those of trunk and arms, and those of the lower limbs. After him, called the NIST law, it is often added that resolution occurs in the same order. Sommer in 1833 has promoted the view that the development of rigor mortis could produce significant movements of the body in special circumstances, such as extreme position of the body at the moment of death. According to him, no measurable shortening of muscles occurs during rigor mortis unless the muscles are subjected to tension. Did I just read that? Yeah, but they have that same paragraph twice. Okay. Where the death is poisoning by the cistrine, this is almost instantaneous with a short convulsive stage. The rigor mortis comes on rapidly and remains a long time. Swenson, Arnie, Wend, Otto, and Fisher-Berry, 1914, stated that the biomedical changes in the body produce stiffening known as rigor mortis, which usually appears 2 to 6 hours after death. Rigor mortis begins in the muscles and remains for 2 to 3 days and disappears in the same order in which it appeared. The very young and very old will likely develop less rigidity than adults with well-developed musculature. Wordsworth William, 1916, stated that rigor mortis or cadaveric rigidity is the result of coagulation of at least part of the muscle substance, and it appears to start with plasma. The clots become firmer and probably involves other parts of the muscle substance. It comes on quicker in recent fatigued muscles. It comes in earlier in the smaller and more active muscles that have a smaller amount of plasma. Rigor depends on such physical conditions or influences as heat, electricity, and the amount of fluids. It seems to depend far more on chemical conditions, specifically fatigue, stuffs, and poisons. The period of rigidity varies in considerable degree of relaxation, usually lasting about 2 days, but the onset and fading being usually gradual. It is difficult to determine accurately. The passing of the rigidity usually begins in the smaller mobile muscle and follows the general order of onset, both varying large under local conditions. Robertson stated, the rigor mortis consists in hardening and stiffening of muscles of the whole body, which sets in some hours after death. Rigor mortis appears in definite order, affecting the various groups of muscles. The stiffening effects of the muscles in the following order: the eyelids, the muscles of the neck, the lower jaw, the muscles of the face, chest, upper extremities, trunk, lower extremities. Rigor mortis passes in the same order as it comes on. Time of onset varies greatly in different cases, but on average, it may be said to commence 2 to 4 hours after death to persist until decomposition comes on in from 1 to 3 days. He further states some conditions in which the rigor mortis to delay or appears early. The death followed by convulsions, muscular exertion, racing, the rigor mortis will appear earlier. In wasting diseases like cancer, rigor mortis will appear early. And newborn postmortem rigidity comes on very rapidly and passes off equally as soon. In warm climate, the onset is rapid and so is the disappearance. The delayed onset of rigor mortis is seen in conditions like sudden death, while in previous good health, like asphyxia, narcotic poisoning, it is even said to be absent in such cases. In paralyzed muscles, it is long delayed. Colonel William McGrinney and Petty Charles VI stated that the body normally begins to stiffen 2 to 3 hours after death. It becomes apparent in the small muscle groups first and later progresses to larger muscle groups in order of increasing mass. Complete stiffness of body usually occurs within 6 to 8 hours before receding in approximately the same sequence in which the stiffness occurred. They also stated that external factors produce marked changes in the onset and duration of the rigor mortis, like cold will delay the rigor while heat will hasten the rigor. Internal factor, like in cases of infant rigor, have rapid onset. Emancipated built will delay the rigor, and in extreme obese persons, a rigor is totally absent. What? Okay. Owens TF reported that rigor appears first in the jaw and the face. It rapidly spreads to the muscles of the neck and back, then to the upper extremities, and finally the lower extremities. The time of onset varies somewhat, but the rigor generally present in the jaw by the end of 2 hours after death, and the upper extremity is probably rigid in 3. The rigidity is complete in another hour. The order of disappearance as the same of onset, and all the traces of rigidity in the majority of cases disappeared in the 20 to 24 hours after death. Okay. So Owens found rigor mortis fully developed before the end of the 7th hour after death in 92 out of 113 cases. Malik has given the chronology of development of rigor mortis based on the survey of literature from 1811 to 1960, 150 years, as per following the table where he compared, evaluated the observations statistically. The observations are highly subjective. He stated the reasons for the great difference in the development of rigor based on one corpse and another is biological, or more precisely biomedical, and also it can be affected by a number of intrinsic and extrinsic factors. He studied 108 publications on rigor mortis and evaluated them statistically. He had shown that before rigor mortis, there is a delay period for about 3 hours, and the complete rigidity is seen within 8. And its persistence is around 57 hours, and resolution of rigor is seen around 76 hours. Okay, and the stiffening of fibers and somas, a lot of these guys are just stating the same thing. Yeah. that's interesting. The jaw. Cool jog is stay for an hour or less. Okay. Cool. We got a mini lesson on that. Oh, whoa. Oh, look. Okay. Influencing conditions on the onset and duration of rigors. So the condition of the body, we just read a lot of that. The age of the deceased, cause of death, environmental factors, right? They were all affected. So the forensic significance of rigor mortis, time since death in relation to age, sex, weight, yeah. Well, I think we get that part. Yeah, that was pretty cool. We got a brief history. Heather Fitzgerald said the body changes are very specific for Mabat to say, they call me late to know the time, as she literally stated his total sight. Yeah. The stiffening. Who's that? Who's saying that? Oh, backwood beats, welcome. Peak stiffening. Yeah, welcome. Oh, yeah. So I think it's very interesting. So medically, how does that stand up to these text messages? Because these text messages, what did you say, backwood beats? A Walmart tent and a Cat 5 wind? That's going to be these text messages if the medical stuff is different. Um, so I hope we learned a little bit today about the interval, the post-mortem interval. Well, we didn't read this one yet. So forensic pathologists are the medical professionals who primarily estimate the post-mortem interval or time since death during autopsies and forensic investigations. Okay, here's a more detailed explanation. So forensic pathologists, these are medical doctors specializing in the investigation of sudden, unexpected, or violent deaths. The role of the forensic pathologist in PMI estimation. They use a variety of techniques, including observing postmortem changes like rigor mortis, stiffening of the muscles, and algor mortis, body cooling, to estimate the time of death. Other professionals involved. While forensic pathologists are the primary experts, and other professionals like forensic and entomologists who study insects on the corpses, and forensic anthropologists who study skeletal remains. Oh, that is so cool. Just like to be like a anthropologist or a geologist or, just something cool like that. That would be awesome. Can also contribute to the PMI estimation in certain cases. The importance of the PMI, accurate PMI estimation is crucial for police investigations, criminal responsibility, and insurance payments. Oh, yeah, they got there, the insurance payments are there. It's true, though, but that's funny. Cool. So Kathy Mabutt, she is sort of involved, but not really. I think she may have called the time of death, but she may not have called the postmortem interval, which they're like interchangeable. If somebody could help me understand why they're interchangeable or different, because I know they're different, but they're similar. And so the time of death, I guess, is what we read was when the coroner arrives on the scene. And then the postmortem interval is something that the examiner, somebody who examines the body, could determine depending on these biochemical changes. Yeah. Well, that's really all I had to share with you guys today. So thank you for coming by. Thank you in chat. Thank you everybody on replay. I hope we learned a little something and that, this timeline, I think they're going to go at it tomorrow. And they should because, these text messages are like a Walmart tent and a Cat 5 win. Like, yeah. That's a quote from Backwood Beats song. It's so good. Yeah. Oh, Backwood Beats says postmortem is just a more formal and sometimes older version of the term. Heather says a coroner could do some examinations upon viewing at the scene that would help the time of death more accurately. Yeah. I'm curious to see or hear about the autopsy. I'm sure we won't see pictures, but we might, hear a little bit of how it went or like what their process is or how they do that. Yeah, like anytime you look at something medically, you're not necessarily looking at like the autopsies or the pictures. You're just more trying to find out the process. What are the scientific and medical standards? Like, how did they approach this kind of thing? And so I'm interested to know how they approached it because that will directly affect the timeline and it will directly affect the defendant, Brian. Tonka says, assuming the coroner has a clue. Okay, so I will be live tomorrow. I'll start at 10:30, I guess, because it'll be, well, I guess, I don't know what time it will be where you are. But I'll be on. I can't wait to see Bigga just completely destroy. And then, Cyree will burn the house down too. So we're going to have a lot of fun tomorrow. All right. Good night, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow.